In recent years, one name has been hovering behind the scenes of science like a forbidden whisper: K2-18B. An exoplanet outside our solar system, far enough away to seem harmless, but with elements in its atmosphere that defy the laws of probability. Methane, carbon dioxide, water vapor. Signals that for some scientists may just be a chemical coincidence. For others, they are a sign of something vivo. Classified documents, redirected sensors, and strategic silence from NASA. If this discovery is real, and some say it is, then humanity is about to face a truth it was never prepared to hear. Do you really believe we are being informed about everything that has ever been detected beyond Earth? Or are there truths that will never be revealed unless something gets out of control? Comment below. Do you believe NASA could be hiding information about extraterrestrial life? Or is this all just theory? In this video, you will learn about signs, omissions, and decisions that indicate that perhaps the impossible is already happening, and we are only seeing the surface. K2-18B is an exoplanet located in the constellation Leo, orbiting a red dwarf star known as K2-18, approximately 120 light-years from Earth. Despite its distance, it quickly became one of the most observed and discussed targets in the scientific community. The reason? K2-18b is in a region of space known as the habitable zone, a band around a star where the temperature allows liquid water to exist. In simple terms, it is the ideal distance for a planet to support life as we know it. But there is more than that. K2-18b is not just a potentially habitable planet. It is classified as a super-Earth, with a mass about 8 times that of Earth and a radius approximately 2.6 times that. These numbers indicate that its gravity would be more intense, its atmosphere denser, and its composition potentially even richer in complex chemical elements. In 2019, one of the most striking discoveries: scientists detected water vapor in its atmosphere. A rare signal which immediately raised real possibilities of climate activity similar to what we have here. With the arrival of the James Webb Telescope, more recent analyses revealed not only water vapor, but also methane and carbon dioxide, an unusual combination that on Earth is usually associated with biological processes. Although it is not yet direct proof of life, this chemical pattern raises a legitimate scientific suspicion. There is something active in that atmosphere. And if there is a biological cycle happening there, even at a microbial level, we would be facing a historic milestone. It is important to highlight that this type of detection requires extreme precision. The data comes from spectroscopic analysis, where the star's light that passes through the planet's atmosphere is broken down into wavelengths. From this signature, scientists infer atmospheric composition based on specific absorption patterns. When multiple elements like these appear together, the margin for interpretation narrows and speculation begins to give way to more concrete hypotheses. K2-18b is in a unique category among the more than 5,000 exoplanets already catalogued. It brings together in the same celestial body water, organic molecules, orbital stability, and a favorable location in relation to its star. For many astronomers, it is not just another planet, it is a statistical anomaly that challenges the traditional model of planetary formation. But what if they told you that NASA has already found signs that could indicate more than just favorable conditions, and that the combination of these elements could be hiding something that most people have not yet been allowed to know? The year was 2019. A group of British scientists announced something that until then was considered unlikely: the detection of water vapor in the atmosphere of a planet outside the solar system. The name of the planet? K2-18b. The news quickly spread among astronomical institutions and research centers, not because of the simple fact of the discovery, but because of what it represented. For the first time, an essential element for life was identified in a world located in the so-called habitable zone. Until then, exoplanets were mainly analyzed by their masses, orbits, and distances from their stars. The detection of atmospheric composition with water in a gaseous state, it represented a technical and conceptual shift. But that was just the surface. The real impact would come later. With the advancement of spectroscopy technologies, the next step involved James Webb Space Telescope, launched in 2021. Equipped with sensors that capture chemical signatures with unprecedented precision, it was aimed at K2-18B. What he found there caught immediate attention: methane and carbon dioxide in proportions that cannot be explained by simple geological processes alone. More than that, the patterns of these combined molecules are highly compatible with biosignatures, indirect evidence of biological life. On Earth, this same combination occurs naturally in metabolic processes of living organisms. In K2-18B, the concentrations detected suggest that something active is maintaining this chemical balance. This is not a hasty conclusion. It is a hypothesis based on concrete data, discussed with caution but taken seriously by the world's main space agencies. The scientific community was divided. Part sees the discovery as a statistical coincidence. Another part believes that we are facing one of the strongest candidates for life outside Earth ever recorded. There is still no consensus, and nor should there be. Scientific rigor requires time, repetition, and caution. But there is something about this case that makes the wait uncomfortable. The chemical ratios detected are too anomalous to be ignored. K2-18B then became the center of a silent contest between enthusiasm and caution. Studies began to emerge at an accelerated pace, crossing data from different sources, simulating atmospheres, replicating chemical conditions in the laboratory. The question is no longer, is there water, and became, what is the origin of what is keeping these gases active? More than just tracking molecules, scientists now analyze the chemical stability of the planet, looking for imbalances that on Earth would be clear signs of biological activity. If these clues continue to be confirmed, we will be faced with evidence that science has been looking for decades, and that may have already gone further than the public imagines. There is a natural tension between discovery and its dissemination. The implications are too great for a quick response. But what this data means in the long run may be much deeper than the numbers suggest at first glance. In a world where the most disconcerting truths can be kept from the public eye, recognizing who is willing to talk about it becomes almost an act of resistance. So leave your like on this channel. This is a way to show YouTube that you value content that questions, reveals, and investigates what many prefer to ignore. It's a way to ensure that this information continues to circulate to those who really want to know what's happening out there. What if the origin of these chemical signatures is not just a natural process? There are researchers who argue that this data is pointing to a type of activity that we have not yet been able to classify accurately. Perhaps what we call life is taking on a different form outside the patterns we know, and that changes everything. Confirmation of alien life on K2-18B, no matter how small, even just a single active microbial cell, would forever change humanity's status in the cosmos. The Earth would immediately cease to be the only biological reference point we know. And this change, although fascinating from a scientific point of view, would bring unpredictable reactions across all layers of society. The first answer would not come from scientists. It would come from governments. Revealing this type of discovery would involve national security protocols, information control, and, most likely, filtered communication. Even with consistent evidence, it is unlikely that the news would reach the public directly. The existence of active extraterrestrial life, even if microscopic, would be classified as a potential threat to political, economic, and social stability. In the religious field, the reactions would be even more profound. Belief systems based on the exclusivity of human life would face an immediate existential dilemma. It would be necessary to reinterpret doctrines, review sacred texts, and in many cases, confront generations of dogmas. It's not just about adapting faith. It's about reconstructing the meaning of creation itself within a new cosmic logic. At the same time, the popular reaction would divide humanity between those who would see the discovery as a sign of hope, and those who would see it as a sign of absolute risk. The idea that we are not alone has always generated fascination, but also fear. Fear of the unknown, of the uncontrollable, of what escapes human logic. The psychological impact of a revelation of this size cannot be underestimated. From the behavior of financial markets to the functioning of local governments, everything would begin to operate under a new lens of uncertainty. There would also be those who, in the midst of chaos, would see opportunity. Private space agencies, communications conglomerates, technology corporations. Access to information about alien life forms would become a silent struggle for power and global protagonism. The simple existence of life outside Earth would no longer be just a scientific discovery, and would inevitably become a matter of control. But what the public doesn't yet know is that this contact may have already begun without us being told. There are signs that have never been officially explained, and they are in the records. Behind the public headlines and technical communications, there is a layer of information that never reaches the common public. And when it comes to NASA, that layer may be much thicker than many imagine. Since the 1960s, there have been records of internal protocols involving possible contacts with non-terrestrial life forms, even if hypothetical. These documents are not part of pop culture. They are real records with restricted classifications, analyzed by independent researchers who dedicate their careers to studying the behind-the-scenes of institutional astrobiology. Among the less publicized documents, there are clear references to investigations into biological signals detected on exoplanets, including anomalies in atmospheric spectra that, according to the agency's own classification, should be considered inconclusive until further notice. Apparently, this kind of technical euphemism is a way of maintaining active observation without attracting external attention. In other words, don't deny it, but don't confirm it either. Former scientists and retired collaborators report that, in specific cases, there was pressure to downgrade the language used in internal reports, precisely to avoid exaggerated interpretations or reactions from the public. The argument is almost always the same: protect social order and avoid collective panic. But this raises another question: who decides what is too safe to disclose? This concern is not new. There is, in fact, a protocol called biosafety contingency, used as a reference by several space agencies, including NASA itself. It establishes guidelines on when, how, and with what language should a possible discovery of alien life be communicated to the population. The document is not secret, but what it omits is what draws the most attention. At no point does it define what would be considered definitive evidence. In other words, in practice, control of the narrative is in the hands of a restricted group of authorities who can interpret data, filter contexts, and rewrite conclusions before any information becomes public. The official justification is institutional responsibility. But in the logic of those who investigate these practices, it is a technical cover-up model, where the truth is shaped to become palatable, or in some cases, invisible. At this point, it's hard not to question, how far is the truth really being told? Now, I want to know your opinion. Do you believe NASA could be hiding important discoveries about extraterrestrial life? Or do you think this control is necessary to avoid chaos? Comment below shares his theory. Here, your opinion builds this investigation together with us, but there is one detail that escapes most public reports. A subtle pattern, repeated in technical documents and strategic omissions, that may indicate that this story began earlier than we imagined, and perhaps it is already underway without us realizing it. One of the most profound consequences of the discovery of life beyond Earth would be the immediate collapse of a widely accepted illusion. The idea that we are the center, apex, and ultimate purpose of the universe. For millennia, great civilizations have shaped their social, moral, and spiritual structures based on this belief. The simple confirmation of another form of intelligent life, even if only possible, would overthrow the axis that supports all these certainties. The most influential religions would have to reinterpret their origins. Some dogmas would lose their literal meaning. Others could absorb the event as part of a larger narrative. But in all cases, faith would have to dialogue with a new factor, the plurality of existence. This is not an attack on spirituality, but an inevitable reconfiguration of its role in a universe more complex than we imagined. In the political and institutional field, the authority of governments and traditional institutions would be questioned from a new perspective. How to react to the unprecedented unknown. Global leadership would have to be re-evaluated. New alliances would emerge, motivated by technological, scientific, or security interests, and no longer by natural resources or territorial ideologies. Geopolitics, as we know it, would not survive intact. The social impact would also be profound. The relationship between cultures, between classes, between generations would be affected by a new type of existential perspective. There would, yes, be fear, but also curiosity, rupture, and transformation. Human priorities such as power, war, accumulation, and control would lose value in the face of a new race, that of knowledge about what is out there. Humanity would have to deal with a collective identity crisis. Who we are, where we come from, and what our role is would no longer be philosophical questions and would become practical, urgent questions. We would be facing a new paradigm where the answer to the question, "Are we alone?" it would no longer be just scientific and would become deeply personal for billions of people. But what if, instead of fear, this discovery was the key to an unimaginable technological leap? What if we are closer than ever to accessing a kind of knowledge that redefines not just the universe, but the very nature of human intelligence? If confirmation of the existence of life on K2-18B comes to light, science will not stop at simple observation. The next step would be inevitable: explore, understand, and perhaps interact. The initial plan would involve sending probes closer and more technically advanced, with high-resolution sensors and the ability to map environmental conditions in unprecedented detail. The objective would be to obtain data in situ, something far beyond what telescopes can capture from Earth. This movement is already being discussed at strategic tables. There are simulation studies conducted by universities, space agencies, and private companies, which develop prototypes of bioenvironments inspired by the atmospheric conditions of K2-18B. These environments are used to test terrestrial organisms in conditions similar to those on the planet, with the aim of evaluating resistance, adaptation, and possible biological interactions. This is no longer speculation. It is applied research with real mission potential. In parallel, a new type of space race is taking shape, this time less public and much more corporate. Technology and space exploration companies are already quietly vying for the position of pioneers in the exploration of habitable exoplanets. The idea that first come, first served sets the rules may not be written in any treaty, but it is the principle that drives billions in investment. Agencies like NASA, ESA, and even private initiatives like SpaceX and Blue Origin are already studying theoretical models of long-range interplanetary travel with self-sustainable energy, recycling, and biological maintenance systems. We are still decades away from a manned mission to K2-18B, but engineering planning, structure, and testing are already underway. The concept of colonization, although premature, is no longer an exclusive theme of science fiction. The notion of an Earth 2.0 has gained real weight in strategic studies, where K2-18B frequently appears among the most promising candidates, not by chance. Its composition, stability, and proximity to Earth-like conditions make it one of the few exoplanets that can not only be studied, but considered as destiny. Few people have any idea what could really be happening out there, and this video reveals points that almost no one openly comments on. Share now with that friend who always questions what exists beyond Earth. Let's expand this conversation to those who are truly ready to face the possibilities, because when it comes to life outside our planet, the more thinking minds, the better. And there is a question that is starting to emerge behind the scenes of these missions. What if someone is already there? Because the real risk of interplanetary colonization is not just getting there first, but not knowing who or what we will be dealing with when we arrive. Despite all the excitement surrounding K2-18B, science calls for caution, or detecting methane, carbon dioxide, and water vapor on an exoplanet located 120 light-years from Earth is without a doubt a remarkable technical feat. But this data, as fascinating as it is, do not yet constitute direct proof of life. There are chemical processes that can produce the same signals observed. One of the main points raised by the scientific community is the possibility of active geological sources in K2-18B. On planets with tectonic activity or internal gas release processes, certain compounds can be expelled naturally without any biological participation. Right here on Earth, there are geothermal formations that release methane through purely mineral mechanisms. Another factor to consider is the atmospheric model used in data interpretation. Since scientists cannot observe K2-18B directly, they analyze the light that passes through its atmosphere as the planet transits in front of its star. This light is broken down into spectra, and each chemical element absorbs light in specific patterns. However, the accuracy of this reading depends on the calibration of the instruments and the assumption of how the atmosphere is structured. Small variations in these parameters can significantly alter the interpretation of the data. Furthermore, it is important to highlight that biosignature is not synonymous with life. The term refers to signs that, on Earth, are often associated with the presence of living organisms, but that can have multiple origins. Therefore, even with the detection of relevant molecules, scientists avoid conclusive statements. The rigor of science requires repeated validation, cross-analysis, and above all, prudence. Still, there is something different about this case. The specific combination of compounds, the density of the atmosphere, and the surface temperature of K2-18B create a rare scenario that is difficult to ignore. When all these factors are analyzed together, the degree of statistical probability of a biological explanation increases considerably. So the investigation continues, not with definitive answers, but with a lingering question. What if we are looking at a type of biochemistry that we don't yet know about? Perhaps what we are detecting on K2-18B does not fit our standards, simply because we are not programmed to recognize it. For decades, we have asked whether we are alone in the universe. But maybe that's not the right question anymore. The real question now is, are we prepared to deal with the response? The idea of extraterrestrial life is no longer an exclusive exercise in science fiction to become a line of concrete technical investigation that is increasingly closer to plausible. But the impact of this discovery goes beyond science. It touches directly on the emotional, philosophical, and political structure of our species. If it is confirmed that there is life on K2-18B, however simple, it would redefine humanity's place in the cosmos. And this repositioning can generate two opposite reactions, union or fragmentation. There are those who believe that this revelation could serve as a global turning point, forcing governments and societies to rethink their priorities. But there is also the risk of ideological isolation, reinforcement of borders, and use of information as a tool of control. The truth is that we don't know how human beings will react to knowing that they are not unique, not just in terms of life, but in terms of intelligence, technology, and consciousness. This confrontation with the other, even if this other is light years away, forces us to confront who we really are. What if this life we seek is not just a scientific question? What if we have been observed for much longer than we realize, and confirmation of life on K2-18B is just the first step in something bigger? At this point, contact would not be a remote hypothesis, but a natural stage in our trajectory. And in light of this, the question arises that no one wants to face directly. Are we prepared to be the species discovered, and not the one that discovers? And since we've come this far, tell me one thing. What mysterious hypothesis about the universe keeps haunting your mind? Comment below on that theory that seems absurd, strange, or even impossible, because it is precisely these ideas that make us expand the limits of reality. Some of these hypotheses may end up being explored in a future video. And who knows, it could be yours. Perhaps the universe is not asking us, are you alone, but rather, are you ready to be noticed? Given all this, one thing becomes clear. The universe may be much more alive and much more conscious than we were taught to believe. And when the signs start to repeat themselves, when patterns emerge where there was only silence before, ignoring is no longer an option. If this video has changed your vision of what could exist beyond Earth, it is because the question is no longer if, but rather when. Here, each theory is a possibility. Each discovery is a new frontier. And if you want to continue exploring with us the enigmas that science still cannot explain, this is the right place. It's part of this journey. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to receive notifications of upcoming episodes, because here, the next question might be the one you never had the courage to ask. Now, if you still feel like this story is just beginning, click on the video that appears on your screen. There, the question you will be asked could change everything you believe about time, space, and yourself. Go there, you are already closer than you think.